Well, hello everybody and welcome to this week's news briefing commentary. And I'm finding I really like this format because it's a lot easier to talk about some issues than it is to write about them. I don't know, I guess I talk better than I write. So anyway, the topic for today's program is controversy and why I seem to find myself in the middle of it all the time, and the Wellness Forum has been in the middle of it for the entire 16 years that we've been in business. I'll start with some recent happenings that have generated some controversy. I was talking to a colleague not too long ago who was talking to some doctors, and they were discussing my stance on certain types of diagnostic testing and my advising people not to take drugs and to have surgeries, basically because they're useless for some of the conditions for which they're used. And this colleague told me that the response from a couple of the others was, well, that Dr. Pam Popper hates doctors. And then another example recently is, if you read my newsletters, you know that for the last 4 weeks I've been covering this issue with dietitian licensure and enforcement actions, and focusing on this North Carolina story that's really interesting, where the dietitians are threatening to pursue a blogger for criminal activity because he posts nutrition information on his blog. And so a few college professors and dietitians have said that Dr. Pam Popper hates dietitians. Well, for the record, I do not hate dietitians, and I don't hate doctors, and I don't hate politicians, school administrators, or any other category of people. What I do dislike, and that's maybe a more appropriate word, is some of the actions taken by organizations to which some people belong to. Now, I'm not the only person who has been subjected to this type of criticism, and I'll just kind of bring this in because it ties in with last week's broadcast where I talked about Dr. Peter Gotzsche and his book on mammography. And here's a guy who finds himself in the middle of controversy, and he even makes the statement, apparently telling the truth is controversial now. Gotzsche has spent the last many, many years trying to tell the truth about mammography, that it doesn't reduce the risk of dying of breast cancer. And in response to that, physicians and researchers are calling him reckless and incompetent and throwing all kinds of names at him. And I always find it interesting that both in my case and when I look at Gotzsche and other people like him who are saying things which are controversial, again, I would say we're telling the truth about these issues, everybody wants to do name calling and a lot of threatening and all that sort of thing, but I really don't see these people coming forth with a lot of evidence to refute the things that we're saying, which would be absolutely so much more productive. Well, in my case, back to the Wellness Forum, I've been dealing with this for 16 years, and I guess instead of arguing with me on the merits of the things that I say, people choose to talk about my inferior education, I'm wrong, stupid, uninformed, I don't understand things, and I guess that's easier than trying to come up with a reasonable explanation for why the North Carolina Board of Dietetics would consider blogging a crime, or why PSA testing and mammography have not reduced deaths from breast cancer or prostate cancer, and why there are not any studies that show that there's such thing as a biochemical deficiency that causes depression, anxiety, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's much easier to call me names and accuse me of being stupid or incompetent than it is to argue with me on the merits of the case. And this brings me to the real point and maybe the bottom line of what I really wanted to talk about today, which is I'm often asked, and particularly recently, why I continue to talk about these things. A friend of mine said the other day, you know, at this point in time in your life, you could just talk about plant-based nutrition, which is actually not so controversial, and then you wouldn't find yourself in the center of all of this controversy all the time. Well, you know, when I started the Wellness Forum, if my intention had been to avoid controversy, we wouldn't have really had anything to talk about, because 16 years ago, plant-based nutrition was controversial. And 16 years ago, telling people not to eat dairy products was extraordinarily controversial. And people said nobody who was responsible would recommend that people, you know, discontinue consuming dairy products. It's an irresponsible comment to make. She's uninformed, she's stupid, and she's wrong. Well, as it turned out, I wasn't uninformed, stupid, or wrong. I was right about those issues. And so I think that taking on controversy has been the right thing to do, and I have no intention of running away from it at this point in time. So I'll introduce you to some of my controversial friends who are going to be joining us for our fall conference in Columbus in November. One is Dr. Peter Breggin, who's a very outspoken psychiatrist. He's been writing books for years. I think he's published close to 20 books now on the topic of why drugs can't possibly help people who have emotional and mental disorders, and the uselessness and lack of efficacy for the drugs that are used to treat these conditions. And people call him irresponsible and ineffective. You know, I'm starting to think I really do have good company. The head of Nordic Cochrane, they call him irresponsible, Dr. Peter Bregan. So I do have some good company there. And then Dr. Larry Pilevsky, who has had the audacity to suggest that perhaps the medical profession might be wrong in some of their assumptions that underlie the current childhood vaccination program. A very good researcher and scientist. And so we're going to continue to promote these types of controversial people. That's why we're bringing them to Columbus to speak at our conference, because we think it's the right thing to do. It's inconvenient for me because obviously I bring a lot of unwelcome attention on myself because I talk about these things, but I think the real issue and the real problem is it's very inconvenient for the individuals, groups, manufacturing companies, hospitals, etc., who make a lot of money promoting the things that I talk about. Constantly bringing these issues up interferes with their business interests, and that's where the name calling and the accusations generally come from. So it would be a lot easier at this point in my life to sit back and just talk about plant-based nutrition. Again, not so much controversy. Almost everybody is starting to come around to agree that more of a plant-centered diet is a health-promoting diet. But I'm not going to do it for a couple of reasons. First of all, because I think making the truth known is a very important issue. And the second thing is I don't want to mislead people by letting them think that they can adopt a plant-perfect diet and solve all their medical problems. You can eat a perfect diet, and your interactions with the medical community, if they involve unnecessary or dangerous tests or dangerous drugs or procedures, drugs and procedures that are useless, you can still end up having a lot of unwelcome health issues, even if you're eating really, really well, if you don't have a great understanding of how you need to interact with the medical profession and protect yourself. So I hope you'll come to our conference this year to hear about some of these issues from some of my controversial colleagues. And I suppose that you have to define who your audience is. My audience is people who are interested in the controversy and interested in the truth. Those who find this upsetting, makes them angry, well, I'm sorry about that, but they're probably not going to be followers of mine anyway. So you can go to wellnessforum.com and you'll see the icon to click on the reservation, how to make reservations for the conference. And of course, pass this on to anybody who you think should see it, particularly if you know that they're interested in controversy too.